Hello and welcome to another episode of Twisty Customs, and today we're going to be comparing the Nova Springfield LA Vickers Custom with the Garda model 1911A1 Springfield Armory pistol. Both of these are conversion kits coming in at wildly different price points. So I wanted to see if it was worth spending the extra money, and we'll be taking a look at the fitment issues and performance of both of these pistols. Okay, let's start by taking a look at the Nova kit. The Nova kit is the Springfield Armory LA Vickers Custom. I think that's Larry Vickers. I don't know what LA stands for. Maybe that's his middle initial. And this is a very basic Nova upgrade kit, and from a fair few years back, as far as I'm aware. The kit comes with the slide, the frame. It comes with a very poor aluminium inner barrel, steel front sights, and a tactical rear sight. It comes with the bushings for the hand grip, and one other piece which may be familiar to some of you and may not be familiar to others. But in the old days, the TM 1911 frame did not have this piece molded into the inner chassis, and it was all a little bit wobbly. So this comes as a separate piece that you could insert in there, and that comes with the frame. But if you've got a fairly recent 1911, then I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to need it. But it's nice that it's included in case you are converting an older 1911 gun. This is very clearly designed to be used to upgrade an existing pistol because you need this inner chassis. It would not be possible to build this from scratch because, as far as I'm aware, it's impossible to buy inner chassis on their own any longer. I believe Airsoft Masterpiece, perhaps Garda, used to make them, but no more. So what did we have to do to get this lot to fit together? Well, it was an interesting build, to say the least. Less problematic than my SAI Nova build that I did previously, but there were some common elements. Inside the frame here, where the left thumb safety goes in, it pivots, and that hole just there on the Nova frames, I found this on both frames from Nova that I've worked with, was a little bit too thick for the notch in the safety lever, making it very, very difficult, or in fact impossible originally, to be able to move the thumb safety. So what I had to do is just take a file to the inside of the frame there and just narrow the frame a little bit inside the hole where the safety goes, not the pivot point, but the point that interfaces with the pieces inside the hammer set. And that was enough to be able to get that frame to move smoothly. Sorry, I forgot to mention this tube here, which is removable, that houses the plungers and spring. That is also included with the frame, as are the plungers. It's very cheap of Nova to include the plungers but not include a spring, so I had to take a spring from a spares kit. The reason the plungers are included with the plunger tube is that Nova uses a size that nobody else uses. The diameter of these plungers is much bigger than the stock TM ones. So you cannot purchase Airsoft Masterpiece or 9-ball or any other brand of plungers and use them in this Nova kit because they'll just fly out because they're too narrow. Very odd decision by Nova, especially when it becomes almost impossible to buy Nova plunger springs. So you better be very careful removing that thumb safety, because those have a tendency to fly off. Just while we're here, we've got Airsoft Masterpiece mag catch, thumb safety. I believe it's a Nova S70 grip safety, Airsoft Masterpiece spur hammer. It's an Edge T1 trigger, and inside we have an Edge ultralight blowback unit with a Garda enhanced nozzle with stock TM internals, a Nova brass hop-up unit. Inside there we have a PDI 6.01 barrel and an I believe it's a Decepticon 70-degree bucking. The spring, I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect this might be an AIP 140. I'm not sure why that's in here at the moment. I might switch that out for my preferred spring, which is the Cow RS1 at the moment. 4 buffers and a couple of washers. The barrel I've switched out for an Airsoft Masterpiece full steel version because the included aluminium version was horrible, and we'll see that a bit later because it's currently living in the Garda kit. Now 9-ball sells a guide rod and plug set along with a spring that allows you to use a full-length guide rod, so that when the slide operates you get the guide rod poking out. Now traditionally in 1911 that guide rod plug is capped. There's a seal over the end of it. We can see that here on the Garda one here. There you go, there's a bit of checkering on there, and that is exactly what you normally get on a stock 1911. But with the 9-ball kit, it comes with a open guide rod plug that allows it to be used with the bushing that you need on a 1911 barrel, and to use a full-length guide rod. Now the one that it comes with the kit from 9-ball is slightly annoying in that it is 2-piece, so it does require screwing together, but it has no holes in the 2 different pieces to be able to torque them down. That is very, very annoying, and without Loctite that'll gradually unscrew itself over time as you fire the pistol. As noted, it has a bushing. This is a Garda steel bushing, and that's necessary because it uses the straight type of barrel, as is typical of 1911s. What else did I need to do? So when I installed the trigger, I installed with an Airsoft Masterpiece triggering, and I've found this on 3 or 4 guns now, is that Airsoft Masterpiece triggerings have often led me to having that issue where you get that double trigger thing. You press the trigger, it doesn't fire. You press it again and it fires. And it's insanely irritating. And often if you go looking on the internet, you will find solutions like bend the right hand prong on the leaf spring, which will enable you to be able to push the disconnector up. All sorts of file the disconnector path, do this, do that. But what I have found in common with all of those problem builds was that the Airsoft Masterpiece triggering is slightly too large by a matter of, 0.5, 0.6 of a millimeter. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. I switched it out for a Nova triggering, and no problems. That problem went away. As a separate purchase, I bought the Nova Vickers combined mainspring housing and magwell. That slipped in no problem. However, what is very odd is, I'm not sure if this reads on video, but the finish is this matte finish on the frame and slide. On the magwell, it feels rougher. I guess this is an aluminium finish, and this is a steel finish on the magwell, but it's just different. It's a shame that they can't bring some level of consistency. You can possibly see the difference between the magwell and the frame there. Very, very strange. Now, the biggest fitment issues I had here was getting the inner chassis into the frame. This was quite problematic, especially as there's a bit of an angle at the rear of the rear of the inner chassis, and it has to match with that angle at the rear of the frame as well. This is the first one that I'd done. I don't think I did a particularly good job, but it's certainly workable now. But it did require taking a file to the inside of the frame all the way around, and especially at the back there, to be able to make enough space for the TM inner chassis to drop in. That was by far the biggest niggle of this whole build. So when you consider the inner part of the chassis there and the width of the frame on the thumb safety, you realize it's all pretty darned annoying. Oddly, one of the other things I needed to do here was to just file out the grip pin hole on the inside of the magwell, because although it's tight up against the frame, the pin would not go in, and I had to just take off this edge inside the magwell to get that pin to go through, and it's still a pretty tight fit. What else? Over on the slide we have the hammer protection pad that comes from the stock Tokyo Marui. The shape of the pad is curved at the top on this kit, which makes it pretty annoying, and it doesn't fit directly, so that needs shaving off a little bit with a file to be able to get that to work. One other thing that is worth noting about this Nova kit, this particular one indeed, is that it did not like the KJW magazines. They were not a good fit. They are slightly larger than the regular TM MEU magazines. They're also a lot cheaper, but they were just slightly too much for the tolerances of the Nova. As we've discovered with the other pieces, the tolerances are quite tight, which is, it does mean more fitment and it does mean more work to get it to fit together, but ultimately it does make for a tighter and less rattly gun. So those are the main issues that I had with the Nova. Springfield LA Customs. Ooh. Oh, it doesn't want to go back. Let's have a look. There we go. And I should also mention that these plungers on both ends are incredibly oversized. They're very, very long, and this is after I've actually shaved them down to be able to get the there we go, to be able to get the slide stop in there at all. Before that I could not get them in there whatsoever. There's a very strong spring in there for a very satisfying clack on return to battery. And generally I'm very pleased. If you can see at the back there, when I try and wiggle, there is no movement whatsoever. There was a little bit of fitting required on the inner chassis to the slide, but just a little bit of sandpaper taking off a tiny little bit, basically just smoothing out the finish, really was enough to get that moving properly, and it's made for a very tight fitting slide. So now what we have is a gun that is fairly solid, yeah, not too rattly, and this is my current backup pistol for IPSC standard, classic division shooting, in case my primary weapon is malfunctioning. This is the one that I'll pull out. The accuracy on this is great. I find it fairly easy to acquire targets with this fiber optic front sight, and its handling properties are very similar to my primary 1911, so I'm very pleased with this overall. Now, price. This one is no longer available as far as I'm aware. I think back in the day, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, this was retailing at around 260, maybe 270 US dollars. I was very lucky. I bought it second hand or pre-loved, still in its original packaging actually, for around 150 US dollars. Which, you know, when you consider the price of the actual gun in the first place, is still quite a lot of money. But I wanted to try the Nova kit out, and I'm very pleased that I did. This has turned out to be a great little pistol. Okay, so let's talk about the Garda upgrade kit. This was a different beast altogether, and it was a different price altogether. Brand new, these are still available and coming in at around 110 US dollars. But for that, you get the full aluminium slide and frame and the bushings. That is it, nothing else. Now, the gun that you see assembled before you is a bit of a Franken pistol. It has parts from TM, it has parts from Airsoft Masterpiece, it has parts from a Twisty 1911A1, which is a Tokyo Marui clone. In fact, it's so well cloned, it actually says made by Tokyo Marui on the side. This is the original TM mainspring housing from a 1911A1. It has a Nova hammer there. It has horrible plastic rear sights from the original 1911, and they were a bugger to get in. Not easy at all. Garda does sell steel replacements, and the front sight is molded. In here you can see a very awful aluminium barrel, which is incredibly scratched after only a few shots. The action on this is not where I would quite like it to be, but I'm not going to do any further work on it because I'm about to build a new 1911 and use some of these parts, specifically the inner chassis. So this gun is about to be consigned to the boneyard. The markings are pretty similar. We've got the model 1911A1, we've got the Springfield Armory and the crest, and in comparison they are both pretty good, I think. Can you see those on camera? Let me see if I can do a comparison. It's possibly a little bit sharper and a little bit deeper on the Nova, but there's really not a lot in it, to be honest. It is altogether a much more rattly gun, and there is a lot of fitment issues and a lot of play in that slide there. And honestly, I won't be firing this gun in any competitions, not least of all because of the sights, but I wanted to try this Garda kit. Now, it's often said though with Garda that you get what you pay for. Some of their newer kits that have been CNC finished and then Cerakoted and hairline polished, which are about twice the price of this, about the same price as the Nova. I've heard people have good luck with those and good reports of those frames, but for this one, for $110, if what you want is to desperately upgrade the plastic parts on your M1911A1, yeah, sure, give it a go with the Garda and see if you can get it to work for you. For me, I've fiddled with this over several sessions, over several months, and I do not have the appetite to continue with this. So let me talk a little bit about what the issues were with this particular pistol. And again, apologies for the Franken gun. These were just silver pieces that I was using on another gun that I replaced, and they were in the kit, so I decided to use them. You can see that everything here is largely the same as it was in the Nova Springfield. Again, it's just a regular stock TM inner chassis. The grips I stole from the Twisty that I stole the S70 style grip safety from. It's loose because I've disabled the spring, but it's still active in that when it's up it won't fire the trigger, but it will work. So ordinarily I would shim or pin at the top of the mainspring housing to hold the rear grip in place, but as I said, no more work on this because I do not want the extra time or effort being put into something that I'm not going to be using. So what were the fitment issues with the Garda? Well, we can start with the mag catch holes. For some bizarre reason, especially on this side, it was horribly out of shape. What I was able to do was before the mag catch went in, of course, I was able to invert it and hold this shape up against the hole and see where the problems were, and then take out the file and gradually reduce it until this shape would fit in reverse. Then I was able to turn the mag catch around the right way and push it in, and now it seats quite nicely. Again, I don't know if this is an issue with the finishing of these guns that affects the dimensions of the frames, or whether this is the original casting or CNC finishing or the NC finishing of the frame, if indeed this version was NC finished. this was a fun piece. The frame at the rear where the mainspring housing slides in was pretty tight compared to the stock mainspring housing unit, and even without a grip pin in, it would hold in there even under hammer tension, and it took a lot of effort to be able to pull that mainspring housing out. And of course, when you're pulling it out like this and it suddenly moves, what you find is that these two parts of the frame become very, very sharp knives, and you will slice your thumb down there. And I'm mostly healed now, but I was sporting 2 large deep cuts on my thumb for a couple of months there. So again, I took a file just to give that a smooth passage rather than being very sticky and a little bit too tight. It's a stock TM trigger, but the stock TM trigger did not fit immediately. I had to take a file to the inside of the trigger housing to be able to get that to slide in smoothly, although the trigger ring itself did fit within the grip portion of the frame, no problem. I did have to do some smoothing of the inner frame to be able to get the slide to fit. I think this part here. And of course, getting the whole inner chassis to fit within this frame was a nightmare of its own magnitude, far more difficult than the Nova kit. It would not fit whatsoever, and getting it in there and getting it to go all the way back to meet with the frame was very, very difficult. And unusually, I actually got the Dremel out to assist me with this. I tend to use hand files because they're more controllable and you're taking away less material with each stroke. A Dremel is surely the fastest way to ruin a gun, but in this particular instance it was taking forever with a hand file, so I got the Dremel out and basically just carved out around that entire shape for the inner frame, and I took off a little bit at the back of the inner chassis, both on the frame itself and on the inner chassis, to get those 2 angles to meet nicely at the back of the frame. As I mentioned earlier, at first I just could not get this gun to hold a magazine at all. Every time, it originally had the TM mag catch, the stock one, but every time I put a magazine in, it would just fall out, and I thought it was an issue with the mag catch not being seated far enough, and I was convinced it was the shoulder on the inside of the left hand side of the gun that was not permitting it to move all the way over. So I ended up filing it back. Didn't make the slightest bit of difference, and it was only then that I realized that actually the hole here was chamfered slightly, so that although it would go in, it wasn't seated all the way down, and it was only standing proud by a tiny amount. And that's when I had to go get the file out and get it flush. Only then was it able to hold the magazines. Now, I don't know if this is a Garda problem or a Nova hammer problem, or perhaps even a stock blowback unit problem. I think there's an AIP nozzle in there at the moment, again with stock hop up and barrel, and this is the stock guide rod and plug and bushing. But in practice with this gun, what I was finding was that on the return the slide was getting stuck on the hammer just there. The little bump on the underside of the nozzle, the blowback unit was just catching on the hammer. Now it needs to touch the hammer to be able to cock the hammer back, but previously it was just a little bit too much. What I had to do was to take off a little bit on the inside of the frame there to get the BBU to sit a little bit higher. I didn't take anything off the hammer. That was going to be my next step, but that did seem to cure the problem, which I was very pleased about. This one is still suffering from some of those symptoms of double trigger. Of course, now I'm on camera, it's largely behaving. Such is my life. Oh, there we go, we've got a half cock there. And again, this is because I did upgrade the triggering to airsoft masterpiece, and I know that I need to bend the rear bar of the masterpiece forward 1/2 mil or so to be able to get that to allow the disconnector up behind the sear to trigger it when necessary. As mentioned, this awful aluminium barrel, which is horribly marked already, and this gun has barely put 30 rounds down the range, so not particularly impressed. I think that is all for the Garda kit. Obviously a lot more work than the Nova Springfield kit, and despite all of those extra hours, it's still not a gun that I want to use. It's the fit is just not good. You know, the Garda frame to the Garda slide itself is, I mean, you can just see the size of these. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but the gaps are just huge. If I move it on the side, you can see how much play there is in there. Shame. Because actually, in terms of aesthetics, it's very similar to the Nova, except for the fixed front sight and the S70 style rear sight. So I think this is a copy of a Springfield from, you know, World War I, around that kind of era. Certainly not a competition pistol, but I'm glad I got it, and I'm glad I tried it. So that is it. That is my experience of doing conversion kits for both Garda and the Nova. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is Twisty Customs signing off.